Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namachari Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Maharani ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktavrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing with the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita Volume 1. We're still on Chapter 9. Entitled A Resident of Vrindavan. And last week we began the Viraha Astakam that Srila Prabhupada composed in memory of his spiritual master on his disappearance day of the year 1958. So we were able to complete 5 of the Astaka. Now we'll go on with 6, 7, and 8. The 6th, the Shasta Astaka, has been named The Preaching Mission is Scattered. Continue dancing, singing, and performing Sankirtan in the association of devotees. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 792. These words, spoken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are especially nectarian. So this sloka actually was spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's initiating guru Ishvara Puri. And it's in the middle of a conversation because when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Benares, he was singing and dancing in Sankirtan and hundreds of people were dancing along with him. And Benares being the seat of the Mayavadi sannyasis, headed at that time by Prakashananda Saraswati, the sannyasis were somewhat outraged by the behavior of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he was also a sannyasi of the Bharati line. So by some arrangement made by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was invited to one of their programs. And Prakashananda Saraswati, he inquired from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that you are a sannyasi of the Bharati line, initiated by Keshav Bharati Maharaj into sannyas order. So why are you behaving like a babuka, like a sentimental mad person? You're supposed to be deep in meditation and studying the Vedanta along with the other sannyasis. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very humbly submitted to Prakashananda Saraswati that my spiritual master gave me a mantra, and when I chanted this mantra, I would become mad in ecstasy and begin singing and dancing. I thought that this mantra was making me go insane. So I went back to my spiritual master and asked him what was happening. Can you stop these boys, please? Yes. Thank you. And his spiritual master explained to him that this is very good what's happening. This means that the mantra is having an effect. And then he said to me that you're just a fool. You are not qualified to study Vedanta. You should chant this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and whatever the outcome is, you will be able to liberate many people through this singing and dancing and chanting of Hare Krishna. So this is one of the slokas that Ishvara Puri spoke to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he should continue dancing, singing, and performing Sankirtan in the association of devotees. If we have complete faith in these instructions given by you, our spiritual master, then in our performance of Sankirtan, actual love for Krishna will be aroused in us. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he carried on the pure mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by introducing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra as the method for returning back to the spiritual world. Without love of God, our tiny individual intelligence only becomes entangled in the network of Maya's delusions. Because no one actually attained prema, now there has been a great upheaval in your mission. The whole world has become filled with impersonalists, and the Vaishnavas have given up the work of preaching that was entrusted to them and gone off to perform solitary worship. So Srila Prabhupada here is lamenting the condition of the Gaudiya Math at this time. Because although Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, his mission was to save the entire world through this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Sankirtan, just as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted, Prithivityache Nagarari Gram. But after his departure, instead of carrying on the instructions given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, his disciples began quarreling and litigating amongst themselves. And therefore the entire activities of preaching worldwide was brought to a total end. The Vaishnavas were famous as Patita Pavan, deliverers of the fallen. But now this title has fallen into disgrace. Countless numbers of your disciples have been alienated from your movement. That's because of the fighting that went on. Now, the most amazing thing is that we're reading this, how Prabhupada is actually lamenting this Viraha Astastakam. He's feeling great separation from his spiritual master. And similarly, when Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada disappeared, there was great lamentation amongst the disciples because they were so young. They were not yet fixed in their sadachar. Srila Prabhupada only had 11 years to train us. And although we all wanted to stay together as a family, brothers and sisters, to our spiritual father, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was very careful to set up the system that his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, wanted enforced in his Gaudiya Math. And that was the governing body commission system. And he also, Srila Prabhupada also set up a system for initiations. And he also assigned 11 gurus to carry on this initiation process, who he had personally trained and who were already, over the years, recommending disciples to Srila Prabhupada, although Prabhupada in many cases had never even met these aspiring disciples. So after many years of training, 11 years of training, Prabhupada felt confident that the 11 disciples who he had chosen would carry on the movement. But as Srila Prabhupada disappeared, there wasn't fighting that came out. But there was a lack of being able to live up to the standard that was required as future acharyas or gurus. Because of the backgrounds from which the devotees came, they were not fixed in their sadachar. And gradually, it was 1977 that Srila Prabhupada disappeared. By 1992, it was seen that there were schisms because the gurus were not able to follow the principles as strictly as Prabhupada had enforced upon us. And in 1992, the first guru was removed. That was Hansaduta Swami. The next year, another guru was removed. That was Jayatirtha Swami. And fortunately, we had the strength of the GBC to remove people who were not qualified anymore. Soon after that, it was 1982 and 83. And then finally, in 1987, about 5 gurus, all in the same year, left their position as initiating gurus because they were unqualified. So we were very fortunate because we had that strength that was installed by Srila Prabhupada in the GBC, that despite the fall down of some devotees, the society continued in a unified way to carry on the preaching. And from the 108 temples that Srila Prabhupada established in his lifetime, it has now grown to over 800 temples and centers and farms and schools throughout the world. So we did not suffer this dissolution of the society that Srila Prabhupada was seeing at that time in 1958. He was intensely depressed. And although he personally had by that time renounced his family, he had taken Vanapras in 1956, and he was actively producing his Back to Godhead magazine. He had established a League of Devotees for International Association, and he was doing everything within his power. He did not waste 1 minute to continue with the instructions that his spiritual master had given him. But he was alone, and it's very difficult. Has anyone ever tried to go out and perform Sankirtan alone? You went out and chanted Hare Krishna all alone? It's somewhat successful, but when you have a group, a powerful group, it's very attractive and it's very enthusing for everyone, both for the chanters and for the hearers. So this is, it's united we stand, divided we fall. So as Srila Prabhupada saw the discrepancies that had happened when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati disappeared, he prepared in advance that those same discrepancies would not occur in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He said that the whole world has become filled with impersonalists, and the Vaishnavas have given up the work of preaching that was entrusted to them and gone off to perform solitary worship. Now that solitary worship, because in the courts, the printing presses had been sold to pay for the legal fees, there was no more printing going on, and Kunja Bihari had grabbed 2/3 by court order, 2/3 of the society, including the Chaitanya Mat in Mayapur, which was considered the center, the base of the Gaudiya Mat. He also had the Bagh Bazar. And those other sannyasis, there were 25 sannyasis that had been created by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. They were not wanted within the Chaitanya Mat anymore because they were not willing to work under the auspices of Kunja Bihari. So what could they do? they went to their little mutts that they had created here and there with their disciples, and as much as they could, they carried on with the preaching. But the mutt had disintegrated into just insular little mutts. So the Mayavadis, on the other hand, they were the upper sampradayas that had come up. These were the same upper sampradayas that had started after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disappeared, such as the Prakrita Sahajiyas, the Auls, the Bauls. We had the Kas Goswamis, we had the Jati Gosais, the Gaura Nagaris, many, many different types of 13 upper sampradayas. And most of them were Mayavads. We'll hear later about how they are Mayavadis. At such an inauspicious time, O Master, what can be done to repair this damage? The beautiful garden you so carefully planted is now uprooted and scattered about. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was so intelligent that he devised many different means by which the disciples and the followers could engage in Krishna consciousness, just as Srila Prabhupada did, by making festivals, holding huge melas, having parks and exhibition grounds, fantastic ways that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati engaged the arts and culture and music and dance in the service of the Supreme Lord. None of these things were continued after he disappeared because they didn't have that internal strength anymore to carry on. O Master, please awaken some good intelligence in this insignificant disciple of yours, so that my firm faith in your transcendental message may increase more and more. So Srila Prabhupada was making a personal prayer. He saw the hopelessness of the condition of the mission, but at least for himself, let him be given some intelligence how to carry on the instructions that his spiritual master had given him. O Srila Prabhupada, you personally suffer to see the suffering of the fallen conditioned souls. On this day of your separation, I am utterly despondent. Now we're up to Saptama Astaka, distributing the pure devotional process. The Lord's most magnanimous form was Sri Krishna Chaitanya, distributing a process of attaining love of God. By chanting Krishna's holy name, he blessed this whole universe. O Master, you are the personification of Lord Chaitanya's transcendental message. You are the distributor of that message to every town and village of the world. Now, at this point in Prabhupada's life, he hadn't begun his active preaching worldwide, but he envisioned what his spiritual master wanted to accomplish by carrying out the vision of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu's vision that in every town and village his name would be heard. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he carried that mission, being the first to carry the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu outside of India. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he began an explosion of spreading Krishna consciousness around the world. It didn't go very far. He was only able to send his disciples to England and Germany and Burma outside of India. But he had one disciple who was determined to carry this message around the world, and that was Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, because he was a pure devotee from his birth, he had the sanskar, he had the intelligence how this could be done, and he was going to do it. You sent your devotees to preach in the faraway lands of the Western countries, and you personally traveled all over India, both north and south. You preached Lord Gauranga's pure philosophy in such a way that intelligent persons could understand. And you showed great concern, O Master, in persuading all your adversaries. When the adversaries of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would see him coming on the road, they would cross to the other side of the road, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would accost them as soon as he see them and begin defeating them in their own philosophy. So they tried to avoid him by walking around him. Lord Gauranga devised many clever schemes to engage the conditioned souls in devotional service. And you understood how to fully use all those same tactics. You understood time, place, and circumstance. That's Desh Kala Patra. And used everything in preaching. Although observing your activities with their very eyes, those who are blind like owls and other creatures of the night could not see your true purpose. So there are strict rules and regulations for the sannyas ashram. One should not wear any sewn clothes. One should not travel outside of where the oceans are. That means one has to stay in Bharatvarsha. One should not use vehicles. They should only walk wherever they're going. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was bold enough and brave enough to understand the Yukta Vairagya principle of Sri Rupa Goswami. And he learned to use everything in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's service. He would set up incredible melas that had nothing to do with Krishna consciousness directly. There would be wrestling matches, there would be cultural performances, there would be maps of India with all the holy places, and all of these things attracted the people. And the people would come, it would be just like sugar-coated medicine. They would come to see the melas, and at the same time the devotees were preaching with their theistic exhibitions of the dioramas, just like we now have here, and we have in other temples as well. Prabhupada set up the same system that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did. And they would see the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they would see the pastimes of Lord Ram, of Lord Krishna, and in that way, while being first attracted by the glare of Maya's different activities, they would enter into the spiritual world through these exhibitions. He was so intelligent in that way. And just like when the common people, they wake up in the morning, they have their tea, they open up their newspaper, and they read all the mundane news that's all the same thing every single day, war, murders, thievery, same thing. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he made a daily newspaper as well, the Nadia Prakash, so that people could wake up to read about the spiritual activities that go on in the spiritual world. He was able to see how to spiritualize everything. So this was how Prabhupada learned from his spiritual master how to apply Yukta Vairagya in the most amazing circumstances in the Western countries. We'll hear about that coming up. What will the owls and the owls, it's one of the Apasampradayas, and the Sahajiyas and other deviant groups ever understand? And what will the sheep-like common people or the dry logicians ever understand? Now, these Apasampradayas that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur identified, the owls particularly, A-U-L, it's actually a Muslim word that means a very dignified person. They were pure Mayavadis. In the guise of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, taking Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's activities such as kirtan and rolling in ecstasy and going out for sankirtan, things like that, they were total debauchees. Now, how were they Mayavadis? They said, they believed, that anyone who has a male body, he's a Purush. And anyone who has a female body, they're Prakriti. And they engage in the most abominable activities together, even trading wives and partners to engage in unspeakable activities. Now, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava and in all of the scriptures, there's only one Purush, and that's the Supreme Lord. So in the Mayavadi concept, everyone can become God, or the Purusha. So they took that to the ultimate. And for them, the topmost pleasures were just like the materialists. They simply engaged in mundane sex life in the guise of it being something spiritual. There's nothing spiritual about mundane, gross pleasures. And then the Sahajiyas. There are two different margs. For the Kanishta Adhikari, there's Vaidik Bhakti, the Vidhi Marg. And that is what we are given by the spiritual master, so that we have a regulated lifestyle. We rise early, we bathe, we wear clean clothes, we go to the temple for Mangalarti, we worship the deity according to the Pancharatriti Vidhi. This is all Vidhi Marg. And by doing this, year after year after year, eventually, we develop some ruchi, some taste in serving the Supreme Lord. And we look forward to these activities. If we don't get to attend Mangalarti, we feel that our whole day is inauspicious. So then begins the Raga Marg. Raga Marg means when we automatically want to do all these things out of spontaneous love for the Supreme Lord. The exact same activities. It's not that the Sahajiyas, what they do is, they say, oh, this Vidhi Marg, that's for the Kanishtas. We can give all those rules and regulations up now and just worship the Supreme Lord in pure love. And again, they fall down into mundane activities, such as illicit sex life and all types of debauchery. So that's the Prakrita. They take it very cheaply, Sahajiya, Sahaj. It's a very easy process. They don't study any more scriptures. They're so much in love with Radharani and with Krishna, they can do anything for them, and it doesn't have to follow any rules and regulations. They perform great exhibitions of crying and rolling on the ground, all types of ecstatic symptoms that they practice. So this is Prakrita Sahajiyas. And it's these people who, they're deviant from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. O Srila Prabhupada, you personally suffer to see the sufferings of the fallen conditioned souls. So we're on the last of the Astakams now. If only you would come again. Lord Chaitanya's method of devotional service is not performed in by solitary worship. You stress this point again and again when training your disciples. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, aside from having 25 sannyasis, he also initiated some of his disciples into the Babaji Vesh. For instance, Krishnadas Babaji. The devotees used to complain to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that this devotee, he's a new devotee, he just wants to chant 24 hours a day. So Bhaktisiddhanta, he said, that's perfect. So he gave him Babaji Vesh. There are some people who are on that very elevated platform that they can chant Hare Krishna 24 hours a day. When Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji used to live here in Vrindavan, he would sometimes come to see Srila Prabhupada. And for instance, on Ekadasis, we could never do this, but he was able to do this. Every Ekadasi he would observe Nirjala Ekadasi, but that's not all. Most of us, if we observe Nirjala Ekadasi, we have to lie in our beds half of the day. And we're just waiting until we can break the fast. But he wasn't like that. He would go out on Nagar Sankirtan the whole night, and he would take all the devotees with him. He was so dedicated to the holy name. He would, although he knew English perfectly, he would never speak to anyone. He would only chant Hare Krishna. And one of our godbrothers, he came here in 1967. He left America because he was escaping the draft to the army. So he came here to stay, and he was staying here illegally. This is by his own, nothing that Prabhupada wanted him to do. So he stayed with Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji. He said that all day and night he was chanting Hare Krishna. He never spoke to the devotee. But the devotee fell into bad association because there were different sadhus who used to smoke charas, and they invited him. And he sat down and smoked with them because of his previous hippie life. And it was the first time that Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji spoke to him in perfect English. He said, "You must not do this." So his attitude was Kirtaniya Sadahari, which is very rare. And that was why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, using the principle of Yukta Vairagya, he devised so many different activities, the deity worship, the Sankirtan, printing of books, all of these activities, just as Prabhupada initiated, so that we would all be busy because of that motive passion that we cannot give up. But for the Babajis to chant 24 hours a day, that's their nishta. For the sannyasis, it's traveling and preaching. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati did not encourage his disciples in solitary worship. He wanted them to be paribrajakacharyas, and that's why he made primarily sannyasis and very few Babajis. You explained to us all that our preaching method is in the mood of Lord Chaitanya when he showed mercy to deliver the rascals Jaghai and Madhai. The world has now filled up with many Jaghais and Madhais to deliver. Everyone is anxiously awaiting the arrival of Chaitanya Nitai's mercy. So the pastimes of going out to deliver Jaghai and Madhai, that was during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Grihastha Leela. And we're also worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not as sannyasis, but when they were they have hair, they wear very nice clothing. When they were in the Grihastha ashram, because that was when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began the Sankirtan movement. And he was falling into ecstasy by chanting the holy names, the mantra that his spiritual master gave him. But his pupils, who were the same age as him, he was so advanced, he was teaching the young men of his own age Sanskrit, grammar, logics. And they would see him chanting the names of the gopis, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and they disrespected him. And therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu decided, because he knew that the culture in India is, anyone who is a sannyasi, no matter what type of a debauchee he may be, he is still given respect. So at that time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu decided that in order to preach the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, he had to take sannyas. So without any warning, one night while his wife was sleeping, his mother was sleeping, he left his home, he crossed the Ganga, he went to the village called Nirdai, and in that place, he took the sannyas ashram from Keshava Bharati, who was a Mayavadi sannyasi. And Prabhupada explains that, because the devotees asked, well, why did he take sannyas from a Mayavadi? If he's a Vaishnava, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's a Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada explained that whenever you have to perform a function, let's say if there's a marriage function, you need a priest. It doesn't matter what the personal opinion of that priest is. He simply has to officiate the function, the yajna, and the sanskar. So similarly, there was no Vaishnav sannyas order at that time in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he went to a Mayavadi sannyasi, Keshava Bharati, and he took sannyas from him as a formality. But he did not accept a sannyas name. He should have taken the name Bharati, but he kept his brahmachari name of Chaitanya. So he became Sri Krishna Chaitanya at that time. So, and then, right after taking sannyas, he was on his way to Puri, and Nityananda Prabhu broke his rod in 3 pieces. So he didn't have his sannyas rod even. So although he accepted the sannyas order, he didn't have to take sannyas. He was a Supreme Personality of Godhead. But just for the sake of formality, within the social dictates of that day and age, he accepted sannyas so that people would respect him as he traveled around India preaching. Yes, the world has now filled up with Jaghais and Madhais. If at such times as these you were personally to return to this world, once more chanting the holy names and preaching in the same merciful mood of the Lord, and if there were enthusiastic preaching activities again taking place in every direction, then all the people, as before, would be stirred up in blissful excitement. Your profound roaring would cause demons and atheists to flee, and your narrations of Lord Chaitanya's message would fill the hearts of sincere souls. So this is a part of Prabhupada's lamentation, because that powerful preaching was not going on anymore. Again, the whole world would be excitedly bustling with good tidings. But now, in your absence, everyone is mourning the loss of the most precious treasure. O Srila Prabhupada, you personally suffer to see the suffering of the fallen conditioned souls. On this day of your separation, I am utterly despondent. O Master, in your absence, my heart is broken. Abai is here, hereby revealing only a small glimpse of his wretched sorrow in separation. Signed, Deen Heen Kangal, Shri Abai Charan Bhaktivedanta. So, as we heard, now we've gone through 2 of Srila Prabhupada's poems, that poetry is an expression of the heart. And it's spoken best in one's own language. So, of course, this was written in Bengali, as all of Prabhupada's poems, except for the first one. And this is a very personal expression of Prabhupada's grief, his anguish, that now in your absence, everything has been uprooted, and we've lost that preaching spirit. So Prabhupada wrote this just before the disappearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in 1958. And we'll read on now what Satsrup Maharaj has to say about this. Abai's was a dark view. The golden era of preaching that had flourished in the days of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was no longer. By the influence of Maya, Abai wrote, now everything is darkness. All devotional instructions have been destroyed. Now everything has been reversed. Meditating on that great personality possessed of the divine power to save the entire world, Abai expressed his feelings of weakness and helplessness. Because of those not fixed in devotional service, many branches have spread all over. Your conclusive message did not touch the ear. Where will I get the strength for the Sankirtan movement? How could he Abai, a tiny spiritual child, survive without his spiritual father. Now who could save the world, which was so much more oppressed than ever before? So these are the lamentations of the disciple, because when the spiritual master disappears, the disciple feels completely helpless and hopeless. And by the Vani of the spiritual master, he gets his strength to continue in spiritual life. The Vapu has now disappeared. Now when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left Navadvip, and everyone was lamenting as if he had disappeared, because sannyas is considered to be civil suicide. Suicide is criminal, but when one takes sannyas, it's called civil suicide. And that means you give up all of your responsibilities. It's as if you're dead. But he assured his associates that I will always be with you in two forms. And that is wherever there is Sankirtan and my Murti form. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears wherever we have enthusiastic Sankirtan. And we have his Vigraha that we worship. So similarly, when Srila Prabhupada disappeared, Srila Prabhupada, he gave us his books. He gave us thousands and thousands of lectures, conversations, morning walks that we can hear. Again, we can't even hear them all in one lifetime. How Srila Prabhupada was able to speak so much every day, 2 times a day, giving classes wherever he went around the world, plus room conversations, plus morning walks, plus 80 books. Srila Prabhupada, he caught on to the spiritual power, what is it called here? Divine power that his spiritual master had within him. And he carried that on. He was feeling so alone, but he never gave up the mission of his spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had said that a dead man could not preach. Only one with life could preach. As long as Abai and others could deeply regret the Gaudiya Math's failure, there was still life and still hope. If everyone obtained this right and went out and made disciples, then the suffering souls in the world could be saved. It was useless to cry over what his godbrothers had done. Yet in seeing and resenting it, Abai found within the pain of what might have been a continuing spark of what still might be. And this is how we learn from history. This is why we go to school and we learn history. We learn about the mistakes that were made in the past, so that in the present we don't commit those same mistakes. And that is why Srila Prabhupada, although the Gaudiya Math had splintered up, no one was working together anymore. They were all trying to preach in their own insular way. I have to keep using that word again because they didn't have any continuity anymore. They were all separated. Some of the sannyasis joined together to form different samitis, different sanghas, different maths. But mostly they were working on their own, initiating their own disciples. So Srila Prabhupada, he saw that this just did not work. Unless you have a society of devotees with the same mission, with the same forward movement, you're not going to be strong enough to take over the whole world of Maya. Because even within India, they couldn't maintain. What to speak of the rest of the world? So Prabhupada saw he had to have a completely dedicated group of followers. And he kept them. When Srila Prabhupada went to America, I don't know if any of you are aware of this, He went there in 1965, was alone for a year. 1966, on July 6th, he established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He made his first disciples just that same year. Then he made a second temple, then a third temple, and then he had to come back to India because he had his heart attack. When he came back, one of his godbrothers was so envious of him that he had gone to America and was successful, that he was making temples, he was making disciples, he was having Rath Yatra, that he came all the way to America to visit Prabhupada's temples. And we were all just young devotees at that time. We were all little infants. He came to each one of Prabhupada's temples, there were only like 10 temples, to tell us that Prabhupada was not a bona fide guru and that they should take shelter of him. And when Prabhupada heard this, he said, "He is my godbrother. I cannot stop him from visiting the temples. You welcome him when he comes, but he is not allowed to speak in the temples." So after that happened, when he saw that Prabhupada had stopped him from being able to speak anymore, then he went back to India. He saw he was having no effect. He even went to the extreme that we were putting Prabhupada's Bhagavatams in the universities and giving them to the professors for their classes. They were using it as textbooks, the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. He went to the universities to tell the professors that Prabhupada was not authorized to translate the books. So Prabhupada called this godbrother of his privately a black snake because he was so envious of Prabhupada's success, because Prabhupada kept the mission of his spiritual master, whereas others simply stayed within their own mutts. So there was still, Prabhupada understood, Abhay found within the pain of what might have been a continuing spark of what still might be. Because he saw what not to do, then he knew what he had to do. Abhay sent this poem and Vrindavan Bhajan, the previous poem, to Keshav Maharaj, who published them in the Gaudiya Patrika. So now we're going on to a new section, and this section brings up a lot of what we read in previous months, so we'll combine the two together. One night, Abhay had a striking dream, the same dream he had had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared just as Abhay had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyasi, coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abhay and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly, he called and motioned. He was asking Abhay to take sannyas. "Come," he urged, "become a sannyasi." So this was the third time that Abhay had this dream. The first two times, Prabhupada was staying at Sita Banerjee Lane in Calcutta. He had, as always, Abhay was always traveling for his business, but he came back and he got a nice home for his family, and next door was his laboratory. And he would go to visit his godbrothers in Mayapur sometimes. One of his dear godbrothers was Sridhar Swami, because Sridhar Swami, when the war broke out within the Gaudiya Mutt, Sridhar Swami had nowhere to go because everything was being taken by the court. He came to stay in Abhay's home in Allahabad. And he stayed there for a few months with some of his disciples. So they had a very close brotherly relationship. So Abai encouraged Sridhar that you come out of Mayapur. You're an excellent speaker. You know the Siddhanta so well. You should come and preach in Calcutta with me. So he gave the upper rooms above his laboratory to Sridhar Maharaj. And other sannyasis would also come there. And they would all meet and discuss Krishna Katha together. So one night, for the first time, Srila Prabhupada had this dream that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was calling him. And in his family home, he was sitting with Sridhar Maharaj, with his sister Baba Tarini, with one of his sons, and with some of the disciples of Sridhar Maharaj. And he told the dream to Sridhar Maharaj. And he said, I have to take sannyas. Our spiritual master is calling us. So Sridhar Maharaj, he said, you have to wait. If I give you sannyas now, I don't know how your family will take it, because I'm very close with your family members. I don't know what the reaction will be, and it might be very devastating. So you just go away for some time, and you see what happens if you go away, how they will take it. He was not willing to give sannyas to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada remained quietly at home at that time. But shortly after that, in the middle of the night, he had the same dream. And this time he couldn't wait. It was just in the like 2 o'clock in the morning. He came banging on Sridhar Maharaj's door. And his disciples were there with him, so they heard the banging. And he said to Sridhar Maharaj, again the dream has come. I must take sannyas. You please offer me sannyas. You please be my sannyas guru. And Sridhar Maharaj again said, you simply be patient, you go away for some time. But Prabhupada was not willing this time. He left, and after that, he never came back. Now, just before that was when his wife had taken his sacred Srimad Bhagavatams and exchanged them for tea biscuits because she had run out of tea biscuits. And he was devastated by this. His sister, that first time, when he said that the first time he had the dream, she said to him, yes, you should take sannyas, because you're so poor now, you can't take care of your family anyway. So then Prabhupada asked her, well, how will my family maintain themselves? And she said, you don't have to worry about that. I have 5 sons. I will, once you leave and once you take sannyas, I will take care of your family for you. So she made that vow to him, that she would take care of the family if he took sannyas. She said, you're taking care of your family, but you're not taking care of your family because you have no money anymore. Because Prabhupada, he became completely disinterested in his business. He stopped it all. He was just printing, all of his money was going to his back to Godheads, and he was meeting with his godbrothers every evening. So the second time, this time he decided, I'm going. So that was 1956, and then we heard Jhansi, and then coming to Mathura, and now finally living in Vrindavan and trying in Bombay, trying every way possible. But he did not go home after this. Now the third time, this time Prabhupada is all alone in Vrindavan, and the dream comes again. Now in Vrindavan he had several godbrothers, but the one closest to him was in Mathura, Bhakti Pragya Keshav Maharaj. They were very close, and he was recommended by Sridhar Maharaj because Sridhar Maharaj would not give him sannyas. He said, you go to our godbrother Keshav Maharaj. He has my sannyas mantra. He can give you sannyas. So Prabhupada had gone, he had tried to encourage Keshav Maharaj to come to Jhansi. Keshav Maharaj didn't see much scope because it was such a small town. It wasn't the way Bhaktisiddhanta wanted his sannyasis to preach. He wanted them to be in the big cities so that they could preach to many people. So he rejected that. So Prabhupada came to his ashram, which is the Keshav Gaudiya Mutt on the main road, just near Holy Gate. And he brought his beautiful deity of Mahaprabhu and installed his deity there in Keshav Maharaj's Mutt. So now he was remembering Keshav Maharaj. And he decided to approach any of his godbrothers. He had to take sannyas. Now is the time. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instruction Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter. Become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, why would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? By reason that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas, and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formerly, the time was not right. So now that Prabhupada was fixed in his determination to not return to his family, he had already created the League of Devotees. It was a registered society in UP. He already had one disciple. He was writing his books in Vrindavan now. He was printing his Back to Godhead. So he was very much on the path of starting to fulfill the mission that his spiritual master had given him. So we'll hear more next week about how Abai takes sannyas. Hare Krishna. Jai.